Hey guys, it's me, cyoubx, and today we're going to take a look at the DaYan LunHui. This LunHui comes from Will of CanadianCubeShop, so I want to begin by thanking you, Will, for allowing me to get my hands on this and grope it. Is that even appropriate? No, and I do apologize, but as awkward as that sounds, it's not too inaccurate. I have fallen in love with this cube, and I have a hard time putting it down. But before we get carried away with the further sexual innuendos I have, let's take a closer look. First, this particular LunHui comes pre-lubed from CanadianCubeShop with a custom lubricant. I have no idea what it is, but it works very well. The price is to be determined at the time of this video, but check the description periodically for updates. The LunHui is a 55mm 3x3 cube, which is 2mm shy of a zhanchi. 2mm might not seem like a lot, but it's noticeable. Really noticeable. This cube feels tiny, yet weighs considerably more than other cubes. Overall, I like the weight, but not the size. For me, I found M-slices to be a little more difficult to do. Clearly, this is my own issue since I have terrible finger tricks to begin with, but it does suggest that people with larger hands might have a gripe with this cube. On the flip side, someone with small hands might really benefit from this. Aside from that, I don't really have anything else negative to say. The corner cutting is pretty expected for DaYan cube. 45 degrees for regular corner cutting and about 2/3 of a cubie for reverse. What is a step up from the guhong, and something that's arguably more attractive than the zhanchi, is the turning. It's so smooth and quiet. There's really no good way of explaining how I feel about it. Every time I make a turn, my heart skips a beat. Not really, because that would cause some complications, but it feels that way to me. You can't even really hear the cube right now. It's not because I lowered the volume, it's because the cube is just that quiet. It's kind of like a hot knife through butter. Not only does it feel that way, but it turns that way too. The LunHui is not a fast cube. It's a really smooth and controllable cube, and by controllable, I don't mean slow. I've gotten sub-11 averages with it semi-regularly. I'm not too good with analogies, but I'd say the zhanchi is to a skater on lake ice, as the LunHui is to a hot knife through warm butter. Lastly, popping is not an issue. I've done about 800 solves and haven't had a single pop. I suppose the torpedoes play a part in preventing them, but the mechanism of the pieces is pretty interesting as well. Looking at the edge and corner, we see how the pieces have a two-tier design. It's almost like a whit-long fused with the guhong. I expected the pieces to catch a lot simply because there were so many corners, but I had no issues with the catching. Furthermore, you can see how the plastic is elevated at the surface of the edge. I don't think this really reduces friction since friction isn't dependent on the surface area of an object. What I think it does do is give the cube this really nice feel that I've been obsessing over. Just briefly, here's a view of the centerpiece and the core. It's not really all that special, but it is a bit different than other centerpieces. So as you can probably guess from what you've just seen, I wholeheartedly recommend the DaYan LunHui. I think this is one of the most underrated cubes. In a lot of ways it was undermined by the release of the zhanchi shortly after. People seem to forget about the LunHui, which is really too bad because I think it's the best DaYan cube in certain respects. This is going to be the new cube I recommend for beginner and intermediate cubers. It's so controllable, yet so fluid. I think it's a pretty good default recommendation for people who average over 14 seconds. It's not as fast as a zhanchi, but that's not a bad thing. I actually really enjoy the speed of the LunHui a lot more. For the final grade, this cube easily gets at least a B+. I'd even be willing to bump it up to an A-. This of course is compared to the guhong version 1, which is benchmarked at a B. The LunHui is better than the guhong in a lot of ways. It's smooth, quiet, controllable, and unpoppable. This alone warrants the B+. However, CanadianCubeShop really made this cube sexy, and the lube job definitely bumps it up to an A-. I am absolutely in love with this cube. The only thing that I didn't jump up in excitement about was the size. 55mm is a little small, and M-slices were a little tricky for me. 55mm also happens to be the same size as the largest mini zhanchi. However, I didn't find the LunHui that suitable for OH, since it's a little sluggish compared to other cubes. But even for two hands, the small size isn't really a downfall. I personally would like a full-size LunHui, but someone with smaller hands might really benefit with this 55mm cube. Overall, it's quite near perfect, and I really hope DaYan releases a 57mm LunHui after they release the mini zhanchis in DaYan 6. So thank you again, CanadianCubeShop, for sending this out to me, and thank you all for watching. If you have a LunHui, tell me what you think about it in the comments below. Have a great day, and toodles.